Good morning, children. So, in today's class, let us continue the Delhi Sultanate chapter. And in that, in previous class, we have studied about the different kinds of wars fought by Ghajini and Ghor, the rulers, with Indians. And later, after Ghori's entry into India, he was also having this ambition of controlling Indian territories. So let us see how he established the Delhi Sultanate. So what do you mean by Sultanate here? So the Delhi as headquarters, the Sultan used to rule. So with the Delhi as headquarters, the Sultan. So in Muslim countries, Sultan is the name of the king. So he established Delhi as headquarters and they started ruling that many parts of India. So after annexing Indian territories to his empire, so Muhammad Ghori, he fought many battles, right? So in that battles, he won certain territories, like won the award. These battles and all, they gave him certain territories in India. So after fighting all those battles and annexing those territories, that means after having control over that Indian territories which he got through various wars, then what Muhammad Ghori did, he returned to his kingdom Ghor after fighting wars in India and occupying certain places in India. He went back to his kingdom Ghor and he left the consolidation of Indian territories to his military general Kutubuddin Aibak. So, as he was leaving to Ghor and he has occupied certain places in India, what Muhammad Ghori did, he handed over all those territories. The in chargeship of all those Indian territories occupied by Ghori has been given to his military general. That means you can call him like a military commander. So he kept Kutubuddin Aibak, his military commander, as in charge of all those Indian territories which he occupied. And what Aibak did, Aibak also annexed several territories in India. So being in charge of Muhammad Ghori in India, he also went on some wars in India and he occupied Madura, Gwalior and Malwa. So these places were later occupied by Kutubuddin Aibak. Meanwhile, his lieutenant Muhammad bin Bakhtiar Khilji conquered the prosperous states of Bihar and Bengal. So Kutubuddin Aibak was military commander of Muhammad Ghori and Kutubuddin Aibak's junior officer who was who Kutubuddin Aibak used to uh, you know send him for different expeditions and all. So Muhammad bin Bakhtiar Khilji, he was a junior officer who was working under Kutubuddin Aibak. So when Kutubuddin Aibak occupied this Mathura, Gwalior and other places, his lieutenant, so lieutenant means junior officer, what he did, what was his name? His name was Khilji. What he did, he occupied the prosperous states of Bihar and Bengal. So during that time, Bengal and Bihar were very rich in wealth and very prosperous states. So Khilji occupied these two states. And after the death of Muhammad Ghori in 1206 CE, his empire split into numerous small kingdoms under various military generals. So after the death of Muhammad Ghori in his kingdom there in Turkey, later whatever empire Ghori was having in India as well as in Turkey, it got split into many small kingdoms. So whatever kingdoms he occupied even in India as well as the Turkey. So both areas, this was all under the control of Muhammad Ghori. Even though Muhammad Ghori kept his army commanders and all as in charges here, it was still the empire of Muhammad Ghori. So once he died, then what happened? His army generals, wherever he kept in charges, right? He kept many army generals as in charges of various places he occupied. So all those army generals or army commanders, they have they have separated themselves and they have got split into small kingdoms. So they have declared independence to themselves, these army generals, and they became the rulers of their places. Earlier, these army generals used to control that place as an in charge. Now, after the death of Muhammad Ghori, they became the rulers of that place. Qutbuddin Aibak took charge of Ghori's Indian territories. So, whatever territories in India that Muhammad Ghori has occupied, all those territories, okay, now taken under the control of Muhammad Ghori, because he was the army general kept in charge of India. But after his death, Muhammad Ghori's death, Qutbuddin Aibak, what he did? He occupied or he declared himself as the ruler of all the territories in all the Ghori's territories in India. And he also founded a dynasty called Mamluk dynasty. So Qutbuddin Aibak, in the name of Mamluk dynasty, he started ruling Indian territories which were once under the rule of Muhammad Ghori. So, what do you mean by Mamluk? So, Mamluk means a slave. See, this man Qutbuddin Aibak was once a slave, and later he was raised to the position of an army general by seeing his skills. So, Muhammad Ghori, by seeing this, he bought those days selling and purchasing of slaves was a very routine thing. So, Muhammad Ghori purchased a slave by name Qutbuddin Aibak. Later, after observing his skills, he gave him the chance to become a army general. Now, after his death, when Qutbuddin Aibak became the ruler of Indian territories of Muhammad Ghori, he founded a dynasty called Mamluk dynasty, and this dynasty is also referred as slave dynasty. That means, as he was a slave brought by Muhammad Ghori, under that name only he started a dynasty which started ruling India. When he became a sultan, Aibak was still a slave of Muhammad Ghori. So this I told you that. So he was once a slave of Muhammad Ghori, and after his death, he started ruling the Indian territories of Muhammad Ghori in the name of Mamluk dynasty. So the period from the inception means the starting point of his rule. Whose rule? Qutbuddin Aibak's rule. The beginning year from which Qutbuddin Aibak started ruling Indian territories, that is 1206 CE, and he ruled up to 1526 CE. So this period is known as period of Delhi Sultanate, as the rulers were known as sultans. Okay, so the period from which Qutbuddin Aibak started Muslim rule in India, you can call him, he was the first person to start ruling Indian territories. Okay, so he was considered as like first Muslim or first Muslim emperor who stayed in India and started ruling Indian territories. So the time during which he started his rule was 1206 CE, and many rulers later ruled India, and the total time period which the Muslim rulers ruled India was referred as Delhi Sultanate. That means with Delhi as headquarter, the Sultan used to rule the entire territories, and the rulers were referred as Sultan, and the territory under sultans is considered as Sultanate. So these rulers of Muslims, they ruled all the territories of India from Delhi as their capital city. So making Delhi as headquarters, these people used to rule India. And this Delhi Sultanate period, it includes 5 dynasties. So how many dynasties have ruled this Delhi Sultanate? 5 dynasty. The first dynasty to rule was slave dynasty. Second was the Khilji dynasty. Third was the Tughlaq dynasty. Fourth was Sayyid dynasty, and fifth was Lodi dynasty. So these are the 5 dynasties that ruled Indian territories with Delhi as their headquarters. So let us see one by one now. So let us see the first dynasty to rule with Delhi as headquarters. The first dynasty started by Qutbuddin Aibak was slave dynasty. So who was the first ruler of this dynasty? Qutbuddin Aibak. So Aibak acquired independent control of Ghori's vast and expansive empire in India. So how did Aibak become an emperor of Indian territories? As he was an in-charge commander of all Indian territories of Muhammad Ghori. Later, after his death, he declared himself as the Emperor of India, and he established a dynasty called Mamluk dynasty. So thus the Mamluk or the slave dynasty started its rule in India. So this dynasty is also called Mamluk dynasty or slave dynasty. So the word Mamluk means slave in Arabic language. And Aibak was just and able ruler. That means he was very efficient and very powerful ruler who was known for his generosity and kind-heartedness. So we are talking about how Kutubuddin Aibak, how what kind of a person he was. He was a very generous person. That means he used to have kindness and he used to have sympathy and all such things towards his fellow people. And so he was given the name Lak Baksh, okay, because of his kindness and his kind heartedness towards other people and towards poor and needy. He was called as Lak Baksh. What do you mean by Lak Baksh? It means giver of lakhs. So he used to donate money very generously with a very wide heart and a very kind heart. He used to donate money so whoever is in need. So he was given the title Lak Baksh. So he built two mosques. Okay. So this man, Kutubuddin Aibak, he built two mosques. One mosque was Khawat al-Islam. So the mosque, so a prayer hall, it's a place of prayer for all the Muslims. So one prayer mosque was Khawat al-Islam. It was constructed by Aibak in Delhi, and the other one was Dahadin Ka Jhopra. So this was another mosque which was built in Ajmer of Rajasthan. Okay, one mosque he built in Delhi, another mosque he built in Ajmer of Rajasthan. So the names of the mosques are Khawat al-Islam, Daidhin Ka Jhopra. He even started the construction of Qutub Minar but could not complete it. So he was the Kutubuddin Aibak was the person or he was the ruler who started Qutub Minar construction. It was he under his rule Qutub Minar got construction started, but he could not complete it. Okay, so he left this Qutub Minar unfinished by the time he will die. So hence he could not finish that. Aibak did not add to Turkish conquest in. So let us see what expansions he did in India after taking the Delhi as headquarters and other things. So Qutub Minar and all we will discuss later. What is this? It is generally a place, to announce that, to call people to come for prayer and all. So that kind of a tall building it is, or it was. So to call all the people to prayer. So the Kutubuddin Aibak constructed a minar. Minar means tower. Kutub means it was started by Kutubuddin Aibak. So let us see what he did later. So, Qutbuddin Aibak, he could not add any territories to Turkish rule in India. That means whatever Muhammad Ghori has left and whatever he has conquered in the beginning days of his rule, only that were under his control. So remaining, he could not expand much further in India. And he died, Qutbuddin Aibak suddenly dies when he fell off a horse while playing a game called polo. So on riding a horse, so they used to play a game called polo. So they used to use a long stick, they ride horse, and they used to make the ball move. So that kind of a game he used to play, and he fell off that from horse and he died. So and after his death, what happened we will see. So another important ruler was Iltutmish. What is his name? Iltutmish. After the death of Qutbuddin Aibak, his son-in-law Shamsuddin Iltutmish took over the throne of slave dynasty. So this man Qutbuddin Aibak was not having any sons, so he gave his daughter in marriage to his slave called Iltutmish. So Iltutmish was also a slave to Qutbuddin Aibak, but by seeing his skills and his strength, he also made him rise to an army general post, and later he even gives his daughter in marriage to Iltutmish. So after the death of Qutbuddin Aibak, his son-in-law Iltutmish will become the ruler of slave dynasty, and he is considered to be the real founder of Turkish rule in India. So you will later on see why he was called real founder, because the way he expanded his territories in India, the way he controlled administration and many such things proves him that he was the real Turkish ruler in India. Why he was called like that? Because he consolidated the scattered Gori territories under one strong, well administered rule. So in India, what happened when Gori left back to Ghor, okay, under the inshirship of Qutbuddin Aibak, there are many territories. Qutbuddin Aibak was facing lot of difficulties to manage this. After Muhammad Ghori's death, even though he considered himself as Emperor of India, it was very difficult for Aibak to monitor all these places. And when he died, it was Iltutmish who made all these places, under one empire called under slave dynasty, and it was called Delhi Sultanate. So under Iltutmish, all the territories in India that were belonged to Turkish rule, they were all consolidated. That means they were all brought together. How they were brought together? Through a strong and well administration. Okay, through good administration and a strong and powerful authority, Iltutmish could keep all the territories under his control. He crushed anyone who challenged his rule in India. So he never used to spare anyone. If anybody tries to go against Iltutmish, he suppresses them in a very violent and brutal way. He even destroyed the Turkish nobles who defied him to claim to the throne. So what happened was, see, once Qutbuddin Aibak died, there were ministers in the court of Qutbuddin Aibak, and these ministers, they didn't like Iltutmish becoming the emperor, because he was just even though he was son-in-law, the nobles, the Turkish ministers who were in court of Qutbuddin Aibak, they considered Iltutmish as only a slave. So they used to create lot of problems when Iltutmish took control as an emperor. Now what Iltutmish did, he has destroyed all the Turkish nobles. He played lot of he took lot of measures to keep all these ministers under his control. He replaced them many persons. He even murdered many ministers. Iltutmish, he killed some of the ministers. He Some of the ministers were kept under his control by threatening them. So through various means and methods, Iltutmish could keep all the ministers who revolted against him under his control. So that was his efficiency. And also, not only inside his court, there was problem with minister. Outside Delhi also, the Khiljis who were under this slave dynasty, as I told you, Khiljis, they were the army commanders under this slave dynasty. These Khiljis have also revolted in Bengal, that they no longer wanted to be under Iltutmish. The Khiljis, who were asked to look after the Bengal and other provinces, they revolted against Iltutmish. The reason was they wanted to become rulers, these Khiljis. And Iltutmish crushed these Khiljis in a very effective manner. He subjugated the rulers of Ghazni and Multan also. See his way of expansions. One hand, he crushed a minister's revolt inside his court. On the other hand, Khilji's revolt in Bengal he subjugated. Even Ghazni and Multan, which are outside India and they are majorly in Turkey, even those people were also kept under the control of Iltutmish. See his efficient way of administration. And with all such efficient things, he was recognized as the sovereign Sultan of India. That means He was independent Sultan of India. He was no longer the representative of Turkish emperors in India. So, as he could even subjugate, that means he could even control the Turkish rulers in Turkey, especially in Ghajini, Multan, and Ghor. He was referred as a sovereign Sultan of India. He was no longer a representative of Turkey ruling India. He was now an independent ruler of India. Who declared this? The Caliph of Baghdad. So in Iraq, the Caliph was staying and who was a head of Muslims. So he declared that this man Iltutmish is a independent ruler of India. He is no longer anymore under the control of the Turkish emperors. So that was the effectiveness of Iltutmish. So Iltutmish also conquered the regions of Rajput rulers of Ujjain, Ranthambore, Malwa, and Gwalior. So these places you can see in your textbook map. So he even conquered the Rajput kingdoms and made them as their subjugated rulers. So that was the conquest of Iltutmish. So he went even outside India. He could control all the territories with his effective administration. And he refused protection to the king of Khwarizm who was being pursued by Mongols. So in those days, the Mongols they had declared war on the ruler Khwarizm. Okay, he was ruling this modern day Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, this kind of areas, and Mongols and these Persians, they always had a kind of enmity. So Mongols were so cruel warriors. So during lesson, I'll tell you like what kind of that warriors are they. So they had the habit of eating humans. They were so cruel. Whoever they killed, they used to make weapons with their bones and all. Such cruel rulers are these Mongols, and everybody in world used to get afraid if the Mongols are trying to attack any place, they will be brutally doing the war. They're just going off, cutting off the heads, and they'll do war like that. So such a cruel people, they were behind a king called Khwarizm, and this Khwarizm he sought shelter of Iltutmish in India as Mongols were chasing him. So Khwarizm asked Iltutmish to give him shelter in India. But Iltutmish knew very well about the Mongolian cruelty and the brutal wars they do. So he does not want to he does not want to give shelter to the enemy of Mongols. So he refused shelter to Khwarizm, thereby preventing Mongol attacks in India. So otherwise, you cannot imagine if Mongols would have attacked India, the kind of you know laws or the kind of course of change in history we can't imagine. Such a cruel people these people are. So such a big invasion of Mongols has been avoided by refusing shelter to Khwarizm, the enemy of Mongols. Such a what do you call efficient person was Iltutmish. And apart from military prowess, that means so apart from the military prowess, that means his effectiveness, or you can call it like his expertise, his bravery in battles and other warfare, Iltutmish had strong administrative skills. Not only military skills he also has administrative skills. He divided his empire into several provinces known as Iktas. So, what are the units that Iltutmish divided? So if this is his empire, he divided his empire into units or divisions called iktas. So what are they called? Iktas. And which were administered by the noble class known as iktadar. So each ikta was headed by a minister. His name was iktadar. That means he was the in charge of that ikta. And Iltutmish also created an entirely new class of ruling elite. That means he created a separate group of people who are meant only to rule. Okay, he created a separate set of class of people, and that was called as Khalisa, or the group of 40. So he gained 40 trustworthy persons who are specially meant to rule all his territories. That means to be like in charges of all the territories of him. His territories throughout India were divided into iktas, and each ikta was given to one uh, noble or minister, and these ministers were selected by this man Iltutmish, and he was referred as Iqtadar. So the noble or minister who used to control or who is in charge of Iqta was referred as Iqtadar. And these Iqtadars, there were such 40 Iqtadars who were very loyal to Iltutmish. Okay, and that group of 40 people were known as Khalisa. Their duty was only to rule. So this kind of administration made Iltutmish to have a control or to have a very effective control over all his Iqtazar territories. So the first he was also the first Turkish ruler who Iltutmish. Iltutmish was also the first Turkish ruler to introduce a coin system different from Rajputs. So those days the Rajputs were using their own kind of coins and their own kind of currency. But being the Sultan of India now, he separately introduced another coins or another currency system. So it was called as, or he has a different coin system. He introduced under the Sultan, no? Sultan's picture on the or the Sultan's figure on the coins. He issued several such coins. Let's not go much into depth in this. So he introduced his own coin system apart from Rajputs. He was also patron of art and learning. So during his ruling, Iltutmish encouraged many artists, and also he was very much fond of art. So painting and all such things were liked by him very much. He was even responsible for completing the construction of Qutub Minar started by his father-in-law. So I told you that Qutub Minar was started by Qutbuddin Aibak, and he died in between, and the Minar was not completed by that time. So the incomplete construction of Qutub Minar was completed, and even Iltutmish adds some more towers to this Minar. He increases the height of Qutub Minar also, and it was Iltutmish who completed Qutub Minar. He also built his own tomb in red sandstone in Delhi. So Iltutmish, before his death only, he built his own tomb. Tomb means where his dead body can be buried. So before his death only, this man had a very grand uh, tomb construction. So with red sandstone, so which is rarely available in this Rajasthan and other areas. This red color sandstone will be available. Nowhere else other it is available. So he made people to bring all that kind of red sandstone, and he made his own tomb. And next ruler after Iltutmish, the rule slave dynasty was Razia. So you can here she was considered as the first female ruler to rule India. So till then, till here, I mean, before Razia, there was no women rulers in India. She may be considered as the first woman emperor of India. Iltutmish had nominated his daughter Razia to succeed him. So it was Iltutmish who nominated his daughter, even though he has a son by name Firoz, Ruknuddin Firoz. The son of Iltutmish was Ruknuddin Firoz, daughter was Razia. Even though Iltutmish was having his son Ruknuddin Firoz, he didn't opted his son to be the next emperor. What he did, Iltutmish, he wanted his daughter Razia to become the next empress of India. Why? Because this Ruknuddin Firoz, who was son of Iltutmish, he was an incompetent fellow. That means he was not brave enough, and he was not interested to rule. He was not having that abilities or capacities to make empire strong. So what Iltutmish thought, his daughter is more capable in such things. So he gave that emperorship to his daughter Razia. And even though he thought of giving to Razia, but being son, he took that and he became the emperor. Firoz became emperor. But very soon, Firoz emerged as an incompetent. That means he could not control the administration and he was losing his grip over all the kingdom or all the empire. And when her brother was losing control over administration, and he became an unpopular fellow by this time, Razia took this as an opportunity. She already has motivation from her father, but what happened? Being son, he became an emperor, and he proved himself unworthy. So now Razia took his unworthiness and unpopularity of her brother Ruknuddin Firoz, and she tried to emerge as the empress of the Delhi Sultanate. So Razia was waiting for an opportunity, and her brother very soon became unpopular, and he himself gave an opportunity. That provided an opportunity for Razia to claim the throne. So immediately Razia became the Empress of India. But Razia did not enjoy the support of Turkish nobles. So I told you that Iltutmish, he had 40 nobles or 40 iqtidars, right? So these 40 men were very loyal to Iltutmish. Now, from Iltutmish, when power shifted to Razia, these 40 men, they didn't like a woman ruling the empire, and they don't want even to work under a woman. They felt it as something very inferior. They felt it as being ruled under women as a very low thing for them. So these 40 nobles started creating problems for Razia. So she won over majority of the opposing leaders. So what Razia did when all the ministers were opposing her, she used her political skills. Okay, she did various things like some she tried to buy with money, some she gave some power, and some she threatened to kill. So many tactics she used, and she could control some majority of the nobles. Not everyone, but majority. She won over the majority of the opposing leaders who were not in favor of her, and she proved her efficiency like that. She was a competent and brave ruler. So these things will reveal her kind of ability and administrative capacity. Hence, even Iltutmish was thinking to keep her as empress. She could even convince the 40 ministers, majority of these 40 ministers, and bring back her control over the empire. So she even put on the tunic and headdress of a man's attire. So that means tunic means it's a long dress kind of thing. You can like Greeks and all used to wear. So tunic means that long dress kind of thing, and headdress of a man's attire. That means having a cloth tying around her head. So this kind of dressing, man's dressing, was preferred by Razia. So she used to make feel that yes, she can work like a man. She can control the empire like how a man does. So her appearance also was very uh, powerful. And for day-to-day administration, her dressing itself reveals that how strong she was. And she even abandoned the veil. So, what do you mean by veil? So, during those days, the Muslim women have to wear a cloth, or they have to cover their face with a cloth. That is called veil. She even abandoned that tradition because she is now empress. She can't cover her face and rule empire. It looks so odd. So, what she did, she even abandoned. That means she left that practice of covering her face. Boldly, she dressed up like a man, and she used to do the administration, day to day administration. Also, she appointed a non-Turkish Abyssinian slave. Abyssinia is modern day Ethiopia. Okay, so those days, whenever ministers have to be appointed. As these people are from Turkey, the Turkish Empire always used to send people from Turkey as ministers to India. But what she did, she thought that these all Turkish people who come from Turkey always creates problems for her. So she even started appointing people in her court who are non-Turkish so that they'll listen to her. That was her political skill. So she brought an Abyssinian slave, that means a non-Turkish and Ethiopian slave by name Malik Yahut. His name was Malik Yahut, and he made him a superintendent of the stables. Stables means where the horses are kept. So horse army was very powerful. Horses were very important in military those days. So stables are places where the horses are kept. For all that wing of army, she made Malik Yahutas in charge. And the Turkish nobles did not like this because they want any Turkish man to control this, not any non-Turkish people to be in the court. There were rebellions in Delhi and elsewhere in the kingdom. So the Khalisa conspired against her and killed her in 1239 CE. So when she started changing administrative things, when she realized that these non-Turkish people would be more useful because these Turkish people always try to dominate her. When she was on her way to keep non-Turkish people, the 40 nobles or Khalisa who were formed by Iltutmish, they conspired against her. That means they formed an alliance, and what they did by a wrong method, they have killed her, conspired against her, and they have killed her. So after, see, first ruler was Aibak, then was Iltutmish. After Iltutmish, then Razia came, or you can call him as Firoz came, and after Firoz, Razia came, and after Razia, what happened was our a part of the slide now. For almost 6 years after Razia's death, the Delhi Sultanate faced a lot of inner chaos. That means a lot of confusion and disorderness in Delhi Sultanate. After the death of Razia, there was nobody to replace her position in such a strong way. So there was a lot of confusion and disorder going on in Delhi Sultanate, and many people were struggling to become the rulers of the Delhi Sultanate. Eventually, the youngest son of Iltutmish, Naziruddin Muhammad, was crowned as a next Sultan. So when such a disorder was going on, finally they could come to consensus or come to a common understanding, all the nobles, and they kept the youngest son of Iltutmish by name Naziruddin Muhammad to become the next ruler. So after Razia, the his Iltutmish's youngest son Naziruddin Muhammad became the ruler of Delhi Sultanate. And this man, Naziruddin Muhammad, was just a kind person. Yes, of course, he was very generous. He was a very kind-hearted person, like Iltutmish, but he was a weak ruler. As he was young and he was not having that skills to manage such a huge empire, he finally became a very weak ruler. He was just became a puppet, you can call. So now the responsibility of administration fell into the hands of the nobles. Naziruddin Muhammad, as he was a weak ruler, and he has got the support of all the ministers still, because he was youngest son of Iltutmish. So when he got support and he was weak, what the ministers did, okay, let's keep Naziruddin Muhammad as just behind the scene, and these ministers started controlling all the administrations directly. They just say that Naziruddin Muhammad uh, as their emperor, and all the things were carried out by these ministers or Khalisa only. And for this group of ministers, there was a leader called Ghiyasuddin Balban. As I told you now, the ministers are ruling the administration. The entire administration what was taken up by the nobles or the ministers. And for these ministers, there was a leader by name Balban, who was the leader of this Khalisa, or the 40 ministers of Iltutmish. His name was Ghiyasuddin Balban. This man, he ruled the Delhi Sultanate for a lengthy period of 20 years under the shadows of Naziruddin. So, Ghiyasuddin Balban, who was heading these ministries, he used to assist Naziruddin Muhammad. I think mostly Balban used to run the administration in the name of Naziruddin Muhammad. He has got no saying in administration. It was Balban who used to control all the ministers, and also in the name of Naziruddin Muhammad, he used to do the entire ruling in the empire. And let us see what Ghiyasuddin Balban did. After the death of Naziruddin in 1266 CE, that means Naziruddin Muhammad, the youngest son, died, and after his death, Ghiyasuddin Balban ascended the throne and ruled for another 20 years. So, when Naziruddin Muhammad, who was the only legal or who was the only blood relative of Iltutmish, even died, then there is no option left with Balban, who was the leader of the nobles. He became the next ruler of Delhi Sultanate. So he got ultimately the support of Khalisa. So naturally, he only became the emperor of Delhi Sultanate. And this man, Ghiyasuddin Balban, he has showed his effect when he came onto the throne. When he became the emperor, when he acquired the throne, what changes he brought? He marked the beginning of an era of centralized governance. What do you mean by centralized governance? That means keeping all powers with the emperor. Now the emperor is Balban. He changed the administration so that all powers, all decisions must come from the emperor only. And also the political structure of the Sultanate by decreasing the power of nobles. So on one hand, he made political changes so that all power goes to emperor. On the other hand, he even decreased the powers of nobles. Already the nobles or the ministers were having some kind of very important powers. All such powers were reduced to these ministers, and he took away all those powers and kept with him. And also, he made people to convince that Sultan had absolute power in the state. So, with his strong administrative skill, he could even make people to believe that yes, the Sultan had absolute power. That means whatever he decides, that has to be done. So, that kind of power he could keep with him, and everybody used to afraid of him. He believed that the sultans were the representatives of the god on earth. So he even made the position of sultan as a very holy and sacred one, so that people will consider, they'll have certain kind of fear over sultan. He started calling the sultans as the representative of gods on earth, and he must be bestowed with equal devotion and respect. That means like people treat god, the people should also, the people, not only people, everybody in his court, nobles or minister, everybody should treat him with equal devotion. Like how they treat god, they should also treat the emperor or sultan. He introduced the Persian customs of Sizda and Paibos. So in his court, this man, he introduced, Balban introduced certain Persian practices. What are those Persian practices? They're called Sizda and Paibos. What is Sizda? Anybody in the presence of the Sultan, they have to first bow down before Sultan and touch their forehead on the ground in respect. So whenever they come and meet Sultan, the people or the minister or you take anybody, first they have to bow down on the land and they have to touch their forehead to ground, so that it is like a a mark of respect for Sultan. Anybody who visits him must and should follow this kind of practice. That's called Sizda. And kiss the feet of Sultan. So kissing the feet of Sultan was also a Persian practice. It was called Paibos. So as it is, he considers himself as a god, representative of God. He wants people to come and kiss his feet. That shows how authoritarian he was. And Balban followed a policy of blood and iron. What do you mean by blood and iron? If anybody does not listen to him, he used to either kill them, or why they use the word iron here means iron is a very strong metal, right? So either he would kill them if they don't listen, or he could crush them with a very strong power. So to just exaggerate the way he administered, they just made this word called blood and iron. And he crushed any rebellion. That means anybody, if they revolts against his rule with a very heavy hand, that means in a very strong way, he used to crush the rebellions. He kept the nobility under strict control and created a strong spy system to keep them in a check. So he knows that these ministers or nobles who are working under his court, they were very powerful, and if he gives them chance, they would make him, defeated. So Balban always used to maintain a spy system. Spies means they are the secret agents who collect information about these ministers without their knowledge. The ministers even does not know, and if they were talking some secret things and all to anybody, it was immediately gathered by these secret agents, and they used to inform to Balban. So such a mechanism he created to keep the ministers or the nobility under control. He established security and stability in the kingdom. So being a powerful emperor, he made empire to be very peaceful with more security and stability. So how he maintained this security and stability in the kingdom? By maintaining a very strong army. So this led to favorable conditions for the development of agriculture, trade, and commerce in the city. So naturally, when security, law and order, and everything is under control, and when there is a strong army working, naturally the conditions would be very peaceful. When there are peaceful conditions, people will definitely work very hard and effectively. So agricultural activities, trade activity, there was no thefts and all, robberies and all never used to happen. So trade, commerce, and agriculture, these economic activities were very progressive in Balban's time period. So that led to the prosperity of the kingdom. So when economically kingdom is doing good, naturally that kingdom also has a very good growth. So that was there during Balban. Balban also fortified his kingdom to prevent the invasion of Mongols and others. That means around his kingdom he constructed a wall. So this wall is with a great height and very powerfully built, so that the Mongol attacks can be avoided. As I told you earlier, the Mongols are very cruel people, and their attacks is nothing but very very difficult to face their attacks. So he constructed a very big fortified wall around his kingdom to prevent these Mongolian attacks. And Balban died in 1286 CE. So finally, this man's rules also came to an end after his death, and his successors were weak and incompetent. That means after him, his sons and other rulers, they were weak, they were not that effective in administering the kingdom and all. So the slave dynasty came to an end within 3 years of Balban's death. So the slave dynasty, which was started by Aibak, ended with Balban. So in between we have seen Iltutmish, we have seen Firoz, we have seen Razia, we have seen Naziruddin Muhammad, and from Naziruddin Muhammad it came to Balban. So such a great dynasty which started with Aibak and ended with Balban's death. So In 1290 CE, Jalaluddin Khilji, the governor of Samana, occupied Delhi by military coup and declared himself as the Sultan. So, after Balban's death, I told you there were weak rulers. So, this was taken as an advantage by a Khilji governor. So, these were governors were always working under the emperors. So, now this governor, Khilji governor by name Jalaluddin Khilji, okay, he took advantage of the situation in Delhi Sultanate and he proclaimed himself as a next emperor of Sultan by having a coup of military. So this man Jalaluddin Khilji has got a powerful army and he could get support from the military coup. Military coup means like this suddenly and no support from military. He could convince military and he could turn the military against the weak rulers and he grasped the Sultanate and he declared himself as the Sultan of Delhi. Thus, the Khilji dynasty took over the reins of Delhi Sultanate. So, after Balban's death and followed by weak rulers, the Delhi Sultanate went into the hands of another dynasty called Khilji dynasty. Who was the founder of Khilji dynasty? It was Jalaluddin Khilji.